Last fall, in the midst of the federal election campaign, some activists on the left gathered to launch their own call for transformational change with the document called the Leap Manifesto. It lays out a vision of the future which puts protecting the Earth from global warming hand in hand with creating conditions of real equality among people. One of its authors is documentary filmmaker Avi Lewis. He joins us now for a look at the Leap Manifesto. It's good to have you back in this studio.
It's been quite a while,
It's been a very long time.
And it's a lovely studio now.
Looks nice, doesn't it?
Yes,
From
the early 1990s, you've come a long way.
All right, Avi, let's get into this. What would you describe as the overarching philosophy behind the Leap Manifesto?
Well, I think the Leap Manifesto has been much misrepresented recently. What it really is a policy blueprint, a high-level aspirational call to get Canada off fossil fuels and embrace this transition to a low-carbon economy, which everybody in the world knows we need to do. But in a way that systematically attacks inequality, structural racism, and other problems that exist in our society. Because, one of the things about the climate crisis that's difficult for all of us is that we're all in denial on some level. Not science denial, but the casual, everyday denial that, you try to read a story about the climate crisis and you end up in fetal position underneath your bed. And in order to come out of that, I think it's necessary for us to see the opportunity in making the fundamental changes that we need to make. And so the LEAP is a set of policy demands that really speaks to a story of where we are in history, of the opportunity we have to shift off of this fossil fuel roller coaster. And let's face it, in Canada, we're at the bottom right now with the oil price crash and how precarious our economy is. And all of the intersecting crises we have, it's a way of looking at solving multiple problems at once.
You launched it during last year's election campaign.
Yeah.
How come?
I think there was really a feeling among a lot of us, and we should talk about who the Leap Manifesto came from, because it was a constellation of different social movement actors.
We assume you and Naomi wrote it in your basement one day.
Right, so there's that. This is another part of the very sloppy reporting that's gone on about it.
Yeah.
In fact, it was a once in a generation spectrum of social movement folks who came together. We held a meeting last May in Toronto where 60 people came from across the country. And across a bunch of different issues. There were First Nations leaders there were trade unionists there. Hassan Youssef, the head of the Canadian Labour Congress, was there for a bit. There were senior people from Unifor, the largest private sector union that represents thousands of workers in the tar sands.
Full disclosure, including the people taking your picture right now.
There you go.
Yes.
And there were also anti-poverty activists. There were environmentalists from a spectrum of different environmental perspectives, refugee and immigrant rights people. And we spent 2 days daring to dream about what we saw as a collective vision that we could all embrace for how to move the country forward.
But why drop it during the campaign?
So when you look at the Bernie Sanders formula of let's attack the climate crisis and inequality simultaneously, this is something that's lit a fire in the United States political scene, as you've discussed here many times. We just didn't hear that urgency around climate and inequality during the last federal election campaign. We didn't hear the ambition necessary to tackle these huge problems coming from any of the political parties, frankly. And we felt as citizens and some non-citizens, as people in Canada, in that moment, we thought the election is a perfect time to say, hey, we need a much more ambitious program. Somebody's got to put it forward. If the political class won't, we will.
The one question I hear from people on the subway, people on the street, whatever, is leap from what to what?
Right.
So what's the answer to that?
So we've had a model of incremental change, a very Canadian one. I grew up in a democratic socialist household, as you know.
You don't say.
My grandpa and my dad were involved in politics, and I learned in the
I'm stopping you right there.
Oh, yeah.
Your grandpa and your dad were involved in politics.
Okay.
Okay, for people who don't know.
My grandpa was one of the founders of the CCF, the party that was the predecessor to the NDP. My dad was
the leader.
Was the leader between 72 and 74 when my dad, in the 72-74 period, my dad and my grandpa were leaders of the party federally and provincially here in Ontario at the same time. And that was, that's when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old. And what I learned was that the way change happens in Canada is that progressive parties write legislation, pass laws, make things a little bit better at a time. And this is a perfectly valid model of change until we get to something like the climate crisis, which is actually, as a species, we've left it so late and done so little that we need to leap now. Incrementalism is simply not going to avoid the catastrophe that's coming at us.
In which case, why leap and not mad dash?
I think there's something, if you want to get metaphorical, which apparently on a show like this we're allowed to do.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
I think there's something graceful about a leap. I think there's something soaring about a leap. I think there's something that needs to inspire. I think we find in the politics of the really pragmatic politics that has come to dominate, the almost technocratic politics, the political culture that we have, we've lost something ineffable, that people want to be inspired. The notion that we could be inspired by politicians, by the political life, by the political world is kind of retro now. And I think where you see that kind of inspiration is on the social movement side, is in the First Nations that have been blocking pipelines and making new alliances with environmentalists across deep wounds and historical divides, and trade unions who like Hassan again, and the Canadian Labour Congress, who announced just last weeks ago, that we could have 1 million climate jobs in Canada if the federal government invested $80 billion over 5 years.
Let me pick up on the Indigenous angle that you just mentioned, because the manifesto begins with a reference to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Mm-hmm. And then it says, this leap must begin by respecting the inherent rights and the title of the original caretakers of this land, Indigenous communities. The Native peoples, as presented as significantly as they are in this manifesto, how come?
Well, it's the worldview, the Indigenous worldview, and the Indigenous right and title to land and resources that give us a way out of all this. I mean, I think that's what Idle No More taught us. When Harper eviscerated 30 years of environmental regulation in this country, it was a group of Native women who said, idle no more. We are, in our traditional rights, can protect the land and the air and the water. And there was kind of resounding silence from Canadians who were so beaten down by the right-wing nightmare that we had been living. I'm allowed to say that on this show, right?
You just did.
For so many years.
Nobody bleeped it, as far as I know.
There was a kind of a lack of response to the latest omnibus attack on all of these precious protections that have been put in place. So Native leadership has been, I think, the most significant development of the last decade.
Has it taken over from the left? I mean, a lot of the stuff the left used to do in the 60s and 70s, it feels like, anyway, Aboriginal communities are now doing.
Well, I think that the Harper decade and its commitment to trying to restructure the Canadian economy for the and regulatory system for the service of extracting that one resource in now northern Alberta and exporting it had a profound effect, and it shifted things to the environmental front, but there were lots of other attacks on the Canadian fabric in that time. I think the way that Indigenous people have been asserting their rights in this latest generation has inspired a lot of people who also have progressive politics. I don't think it's one or the other, and there are different spheres, but it's not just Indigenous leadership, it's the worldview. It's a view of our place as human beings in an extractive system where everything is a commodity from which to extract value, which is modern capitalism, including people, labor, and resources on a finite planet with a climate clock ticking, versus an understanding that we are in an infinite web of interconnection and regeneration.
Have you ever heard of the author Naomi Klein?
Doesn't ring a bell.
It should.
Don't quote her. I may have copywritten the paragraph if you're going to quote it.
I think you're married to her.
Yes, I am.
And I think she is the mother of your son.
Indeed.
And I think she did a documentary and wrote a book about something. Well, I guess you worked on it together.
Yes.
Here we go. Should we roll this clip, Sheldon? If you would, please.
All around the world, people aren't just writing to their politicians, politely asking them to do the right thing. They're taking direct action, demanding it. On the front lines, they call it blockadia. The idea behind it is simple. We're in a hole, and before anything new can grow, we have to stop digging. As the drilling rigs and pipelines crisscross the earth, so does blockadia, connecting communities along the way. The metal pathways of dirty energy confronted by this new web of resistance. And I've noticed something else. At the forefront are the people from the sacrifice zones, the very ones who have been written off for hundreds of years. The keepers of that other story.
Naomi's voice, film based on her book. You directed the film.
I did.
And at the very end there, she says the other story and its keepers. Mm-hmm. What is that a reference to?
Well, that's the one that I was just starting to talk about, another story about what is our place on Earth, and another conception of how an economy can work. I mean, it's funny, going around the world for 6 years making the This Changes Everything documentary, studying social movements on the front lines of the climate crisis and of fossil fuel extraction battles, you start to try to boil it down for people. So, Steve, can we have infinite growth on a finite planet? It's kind of common sense, right?
Define infinite.
Right, so our entire economy is based on consume more, use up more finite resources, economic growth above all else, and we're calling that progress. And in fact, we're hitting limits on all kinds of fronts. We're hitting physical limits, we're hitting social limits with the impacts of inequality, and the Panama Papers revealing that the 1% actually have their own economy. The 1% see the global economy as a commodity from which to extract their piece and then take it off and have a whole separate economy. So we're slamming into all of these limits, and people are looking for another set of values on which our society is governed, and that's embedded in the Leap Manifesto.
And here's a quote from it. The latest research shows it is feasible for Canada to get 100% of its electricity from renewable resources within 2 decades. By 2050, we could have a 100% clean economy. Elon Musk, who is a capitalist, you'll be glad to know.
Yes, I've heard.
Says it will be feasible for the entire United States of America to be powered by solar energy in 15 years. He says, little corner of Nevada and Utah with solar panels could be done within 5 years. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't want to do away with capitalism. Maybe there's a marriage here. What do you think?
Sure. There's no call in the Leap Manifesto or in the This Changes Everything project for an immediate end to capitalism tomorrow. We're actually kind of recognizing we might be in this system for a few more decades, but there's something essentially in conflict between what we need to do to address the climate crisis and start having a different basis for our economy and the grow imperative that we live under. Certainly the consumption imperative has got to change. I mean, we're just running out of resources, and it's becoming more and more damaging globally to extract them. Forget about climate change. I mean, we're hitting those limits on all kinds of other fronts as well, water and other fronts. So I think people know this, and the notion that we can just carry on isn't really washing anymore, which is why you see this ECOS poll in the aftermath of a dozen days of all-out elite media opinion war on the Leap Manifesto. It's economic suicide. It's a road to nowhere for the Democratic Party. It's
in fairness, that's mostly in the National Post, but okay.
No, it wasn't.
More widespread than that?
It was in the Globe. It was absolutely more widespread than that. I think it was the entire punditocracy that spoke with one voice against the Leap Manifesto. And then ECOS did a poll, and they found that out of the more than 50% of Canadians who had heard of it in some way, were vaguely aware of it or very aware of it, 50% of Liberal voters support the Leap Manifesto in this poll.
Big L Liberals?
Big L Liberals.
What do you infer from
54%
that?
NDPers and 59% Greens. What I infer from that is that despite a quite vicious misrepresentation of this idealistic document, which I find hopeful and very inspiring, people are ready for much more ambitious change because they know that our systems are failing us, and they know that what we're getting, especially from the new federal Liberal government, is a lot of happy words, but a lot of the same of what we've seen when it comes to the hard policy.
I'm not going to disagree with you that there was certainly a lot of criticism out there to the Leap Manifesto.
Appreciate that.
Much of it before people even kind of really dove into it to figure out what it was all about. But having said that, there were some naysayers out there, and I want to just...
Let's have some, come on.
Why don't we?
Bring them on.
Why don't we?
Bring it on.
Here's Tad Homer-Dixon in the Globe and Mail. It's a profoundly divisive document at the very moment when we need to find common ground on climate change. It has thrown the country's left into crisis. Worse, it plays directly into the hands of people opposed to aggressive climate policy and who claim the entire issue is a scam to allow a hyper-intrusive state to grab people's wealth. Want to come back at him?
Well, so first of all, what he's referring to in people who are already suspicious that dealing with climate change might be trying to address inequality, redistribute wealth. This is a common conspiracy among the climate deniers in the United States right now. So that's not a constituency I'm particularly worried about.
He's not one of them.
No, but he's attributing, this is the watermelon theory, where we're green on the outside and red on the inside. This is what he's tapping into. I just don't think that's not a big problem in Canada. The notion that this thing, which is a call for a Canada based on caring for the earth and each other, is a divisive document, is a complete misreading of it. What's been divisive is one of the many demands, which is a call for no new fossil fuel infrastructure, which the people who signed the manifesto think is absolutely in keeping with the current science. There's a global carbon budget. We have to get off fossil fuels in the next 3 or 4 decades. And we can't be putting in infrastructure that extends the life of fossil fuels, that increases our use of fossil fuels for 50, 60 years in the future.
And that would be all well and good, except the NDP Premier of Alberta doesn't agree with you either.
Okay, well, let's get into that. But first, there's 14 other demands which have been neglected in TAD's and others' representation of the Leap Manifesto. There's a call for massively reinvesting in the existing green economy, which is actually the caregiving economy. Teaching and education and health care and welfare and the arts and public interest media like this. You are a green worker. This is green work. The caregiving economy is the existing low carbon economy. And it's the very sectors that have been attacked by decades of neoliberalism and cuts. So there's calls for restoration of that, for Indigenous rights, for massive investments in public transit and housing, and using the green transition as a way to address a host of social ills. So if that's divisive, I'm ready to be divided. I think it's a uniting vision.
I'm going to leave Rachel Notley aside for a second. Remember James Laxer?
I do.
He was a real pain in the neck for your father once upon a time.
Yes, as one of the architects of the waffle.
The waffle movement.
Do you know his brother Gordon Laxer?
I don't.
He is he's an academic in now I hope it's his brother. Gordon Laxer in Alberta is a professor who has written very strongly critical stuff about the Notley government's climate plan and has been sounding the alarm around tar sands development for a very long time. He's a serious writer. I hope you'll read me a quote from each. Maybe not. No, you're going to give me.
I don't have Gordon
here.
You're
going to give me the Jim Laxer version. Come on, bring it.
I happen to have James here.
Bring it.
Who writes, although the manifesto is vaguely worded on most issues, it is insistent on stopping pipelines and comes very close to saying that resources should be left in the ground. There is very little in the document on how the transition to a green economy, an entirely good idea, he says, would work. The Leap Manifesto is much harder on the extraction of resources than it is on the growing inequality that is at the heart of contemporary capitalism. Inequality in wealth and wages has now reached levels not seen since 1928 in North America. This, James Laxer says, needs to be the starting point for a contemporary socialist statement of principles. Is he right about that?
Yeah, I've got no disagreement with that. The inequality, except that he's misread the document, because the whole fact of our inequality crisis is in the very first words of the Leap Manifesto, and the whole thing is designed to be solutions for both climate crisis and the inequality crisis, the economy that consistently distributes wealth upwards to the detriment of everyone else. So we don't disagree on that part of it. I think the media focus on the question of pipelines was because the Leap Manifesto came to the NDP convention for consideration, and it was in Alberta. And that's a specific sort of historical moment.
But having said that, we do have to talk about Rachel Notley. And the reality is there's one new Democrat premier in the whole country, and she has said, this ain't on. That is a problem for you, isn't it?
Well, the Leap Manifesto is a nonpartisan initiative that is attempting to influence the entire political discourse. The party ultimately that the Leap Manifesto aims to influence is the one that's in power, because the urgency of these crises is such that we need these policy demands to be translated into laws and be passed yesterday. Now, the NDP, as a social democratic party, with a long-standing concern for inequality, with some of the best climate policies of any of the major federal parties, that have lots of different members. I'm skirting the issue of the Green Party for the moment. Obviously felt some resonance with the document. But Alberta politics is a blood sport. It's an oil-soaked culture. And I have spent a lot of time in Alberta over the last 15 or 20 years, have a lot of friends there, and I understand that the Alberta government under Rachel Notley feels that doubling down on pipelines is political survival for them. And they've done some decent things.
Well, but that sounds like you doubt her socialist bona fides by saying that.
No, I was just going to say that. In fact, last week's Alberta budget dealt with a $10 billion hole in their deficit without imposing austerity. I mean, I think that's absolutely historic. The fact that Alberta has a climate plan from a year ago is a leap for Alberta, but it's for Alberta. There's a lot of criticism, legitimate criticism of Alberta's climate plan. It allows for emissions to grow. in the province with the highest emissions and the fastest growing emissions. So I don't quite see the math that they're asserting, especially if they're calling for new pipelines, which implies new growth in production of bitumen and export. How are we going to get our emissions down in any way like what we just promised in Paris? I just don't see the math, and they haven't made the case on the basis of the math.
Maybe the answer to that is we can't. Maybe the answer to that is we are with you in spirit, but we can't do it all today. Let's delay it a bit. There are too many people out of work. Government revenues are falling too quickly. We can't afford the health and social services that we want. Avi, cut us a break.
Terrific response. And that's precisely why we should be doubling down on renewable jobs, because the research is stellar that they create 6 to 8 times more jobs per dollar of investment than fossil fuel investments. Pipelines are the least job creating. The economic argument for pipelines is just utterly beyond me. It's years before shovels go in the ground. The whole point of a pipeline is to move materials without the need for labor, right? So this can't be. I don't see the economic argument. And Greenpeace Alberta just put out a report saying that they could get 140,000 climate jobs if they really focused all of that public spending and more on creating renewables and retrofits and conservation, which is the low-hanging fruit, as we know, creates tons and tons of jobs. And so many of the 70,000 and more than 70,000 oil workers who have been abandoned in the last year by the richest and most powerful industry in history could be put back to work with the same skills that they have if the renewable economy was the singular focus of that government. They've chosen a different route. I respect the difference, but for a lot of us, we don't see the benefit.
You've been asked a lot of questions in your time, and this may take the cake on being the oddest.
Okay.
So with that setup,
I'm so awesome. I'm so ready.
Humor me for a second.
Okay.
Would it have been better for our world if the Industrial Revolution had never happened?
Well, the easy way out of this is to say hypotheticals. I mean, I don't know what would have replaced it. I think the Industrial Revolution was a turning point, and we argue this in the film, and Naomi does in the book, in terms of our relationship with nature. That it was longstanding in Judeo-Christian society that humans considered themselves the masters of nature. But with the unleashing of fossil fuels on an industrial scale, all of a sudden we were able to make that a reality. It used to be that they had to put factories near rushing water so that there was some connection to the need for a natural engine for steam-powered factories. All of a sudden you could put factories where there was the cheapest labor. All of a sudden you could sail ships regardless of the wind. And so what the Industrial Revolution and the fossil fuel revolution did was really set us apart from nature, except we're not. And the climate crisis is telling us now that we have to start responding again to our relationship with the natural world. The planet is screaming at us. Would it have been better if the Industrial Revolution never happened? Like, as a person with a telephone in their pocket? No one's going to say that. No one, the portrayal of people who are on the green left as Luddites is a willful political smear. We're all part of the society. We've all been shaped by it. We all enjoy its many, many benefits. And we can also see its limitations and want to get to something better. I'm not a romantic, despite what Margaret Wente says, that I want everyone in the world to eat moldy potatoes, if indeed she wrote that sentence. We are not romantics about an agrarian society before the wheel was invented.
I gotcha. Okay. You referenced your grandfather and your father a little earlier, and I am curious about the kind of socialism that your grandfather believed in, the kind of socialism that your father believed in, and yours. Is it the same thing?
Did I bring socialism on the set tonight? It's actually, unlike Bob Ray, who I remember in the 1990s was famous for not being able to say the S word, I wouldn't be shy about saying it. I don't know what socialism describes today. And this is an argument I have with my family all the time.
Bernie Sanders, I guess.
Well, Bernie's, God bless him, and he's been saying the same thing for 40 years, yes, and so he gets to keep saying it. I feel like there's a new politics emerging, where Indigenous worldview is connecting with deep green environmental concern, which is connecting with a tradition of social justice, of anger at inequality, of a desire to do something much more dramatic
What do you want to call that, Avi?
I don't have an...
Everybody, you know,
Steve,
everybody wants to
If I had a
pigeonhole,
label,
right?
I'd be wearing it on my T-shirt instead of the Leap Manifesto. Maybe it's Leapism. I just think that socialism, it's a concept that has hundreds of years of history, a couple hundred anyway, and there's a lot of baggage there. I just don't know which socialism you mean. And again, I say this as someone who would love to be able to just describe themselves in a neat label. But I'm still looking for mine.
I guess why it's more confusing nowadays is that both federally and provincially in the province of Ontario, it's been a confusing last few years, right? I mean, the Ontario you and I grew up in, there was never any question about who was a liberal, who was a progressive conservative, and who was a New Democrat, who was a capitalist, who was a socialist.
Yeah.
The rules all seem to have changed. We've had 2 elections in a row where the federal and provincial Liberals have outflanked the NDP on the left.
Right.
I don't know who a social democrat is anymore. I don't know what a moderate I mean, it's all different.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out where everybody is nowadays.
Well, and you know, like pre-1989, we could still see that there was a global battle of worldviews, and there were 2 teams. There was capitalism and socialism. Free market capitalism has never been tried because it's always been socialism for the rich and corporations and capitalism for everybody else. Socialism has barely ever been tried. The Soviet Union did not correspond to those principles for the vast span of its history. And so, but there were still 2 teams. Post-1989, we're in a different environment. Yeah. The entire political landscape has shifted dramatically, lurched to the right. Bill Davis, whose picture adorns much of this building, can be considered a socialist. Where he will not like me saying that. And I imagine he still watches this show.
He actually won't mind you saying that.
Well, there you go.
He won't mind you saying. He always said he was a progressive conservative.
That's true, and I haven't met one of those in a while, and I feel like the labels are coming unstuck.
Let's finish up on this. I've waited 26 minutes before asking this question,
Okay.
So here we go. Okay. Sheldon, if you would, roll the clip, please. I don't have to tell you how many times over the years I have heard people say, given who his grandfather was, given who his father was, it would make a hell of a lot of sense for him to become a leader of some NDP party somewhere in Canada.
Well, as an old friend of the Mishwacha, I can tell you that a lot of us have thought for many, many decades that someday a Lewis or Landsberg, and now a Klein, has got to end up as the first socialist prime minister of Canada. And I have to tell you that I'm still waiting.
That was from a discussion we had in this very studio just on the eve of the leadership vote that Tom Mulcair had in Alberta a few weeks ago. So, okay, I know what you've said. I know you've said politics is ridiculous and it crushes the life out of you, and you've seen what it did to your father and your grandfather. But are either you or your wife considering the vacancy for the federal NDP job?
Definitely not. The federal NDP job, it's a tall order. I have been a journalist for 25 years. I think this now will play a thought experiment. Now I get to introduce a hypothetical. Were I to consider a political career, I think it would make a lot more sense to go slowly, even though I'm not an incrementalist by temperament, and I guess I could be convinced otherwise, but I'm a little intimidated by the rough and tumble of politics. And no, don't give me that smirk.
I am totally giving you that smirk.
Don't give me that smirk.
I am totally giving you that
It's
smirk.
got a set of rules. You put me in a TV studio, I'm at home. I know what the rules are. I think politics has changed a lot since I had a front row seat to it, which was in the 1970s. And I've been on the other side of it for a long time. And I know what we do to politicians. If I can get a cabinet minister and cross-examine them for 8 minutes or 10 minutes, God forbid, 25 minutes on a show like this, I'm in heaven, because it's my job to make them squirm. Why would I put myself on the other side of that?
You've asked the question, I'll give you the answer.
Yeah.
Because if you want to see the ideas that you put forward go through, there's only one place where it really happens, and that's in government.
That's so funny. That's the argument I've been having with my parents for the last 25 years.
Is that what they've been saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And where Naomi and I have been working is on the outside in the world of social movements. I think what we're suffering from right now in our country is an impoverished political imagination, a shrunken sense of what's possible.
So here's a guy who comes along with some pedigree, with some experience, who's watched it firsthand for 44 of your 49 years probably, or maybe even more.
Around that.
Yeah. And well, you saw it. I mean, Jerry Kaplan's one of the people asking, saying, why not?
I appreciate that. I think the job of the outside actors, of people in social movements, in people in civil society, can be much more iconoclastic, to change the conversation. The Leap Manifesto is an attempt to change our sense of what's possible.
And bravo, you've done that.
To impact the political imagination.
Don't you want to be the decider? Don't you want to be the decider?
I don't think politicians are the deciders, particularly when they're hamstrung by trade deals, when the
I mean, you're so wrong. You're so wrong. A politician decided to close down all the coal-fired generating stations in the province of Ontario. A politician decided that, and it got done. Took longer than he wanted it to get done.
It wasn't done perfectly, but it is.
But Dalton McGuinty said he was going to do it, and he did it.
Yeah. He also did a bunch of other stuff that we could take issue with.
Of course he did. But do you want to be the guy who's nudging from the outside, or do you want to be the decider?
I don't consider it nudging. I think there's a dynamic, and I think this is another part of our political culture which needs help, which needs medicine, where when Lula da Silva, and maybe not the best time in history to quote Lula da Silva, when Lula da Silva was first elected, the Workers' Party breakthrough in Brazil, he said to the landless people's movement, the great social movement of that country, I will only be as left-wing as you make me. Now, even if this story has suffered something in translation, there can be a dynamic between progressive politicians and people to their left that creates political space, because we know that as soon as anyone gets elected, Bob Rae, Rachel Notley, Justin Trudeau, whoever, you get monumental pressure from the right, from corporations, from banks, from the neoliberal establishment. Somebody has to be pushing from the other side. And politicians in Canada in the last 10 years have been seeing a rise in that kind of power. It's people power. And I think that's a really important role. We need to keep communicating with the politicians, saying, we're not stabbing you in the back, we're creating political space from below, from people's demands. I think that I'm still completely immersed in that.
I don't deny anything you're saying, but I suspect there are those nights when you and Naomi are home alone over a glass of wine, where one of you says to the other one, you know, this is intriguing, and we shouldn't just categorically reject it.
No, and it happens regularly, and we always say, if Pakin will quit his show and be the communications director.
Excuse me, but my father wasn't a political party leader, and my grandfather wasn't either.
As soon as you're ready to join us, Steve, that'll be the day.
No, you know what? I'm not letting you get away with that, because you know, we were talking at the same time, so I'm not sure people heard it. My father was not the leader of the Ontario NDP. My grandfather was not a political party leader either. I come from a non-political family.
Yeah.
Interested in politics, but not partisan politics.
Yeah.
That's not something you can say. In fact, some people think you were kind of bred to do this. Tell people the story you told me in the makeup room. Tell people the story you told me in the makeup room about 3-year-old Avi at daycare.
I don't believe the story is true, but I had a pretty serious lateral lisp in my daycare years, and my teacher asked me, apparently, the question I've heard all my life now, like, wow, dinner at your place must be pretty interesting, to which I responded, mostly we just talk about socialism. Maybe that's my problem with socialism now, that it takes me back to my lateral lisp days. But I honestly, Steve, it is absolutely a question I've faced all my life. Mm-hmm. I feel more politically engaged than I ever have, being in between jobs. I've been a journalist for 25 years. I made this movie that took 6 years of my life. I'm trying to figure out what to do next. I went to an NDP convention to talk to delegates about the Leap Manifesto, a resolution passed, which I had a hand in crafting, that gave the party a reasonable way to debate it at the riding association level and not be committed to every sentence of it, which the competing resolutions would have done. I sort of did a little bit of politics, and it was interesting. It was exciting. It's not the world that I'm from, and it's not a world that is, I don't hear any siren song at the moment, but you know, we are all in flux. We need to leap.
We need to leap. I hear you. When the draft movement comes, I will be interested to see how you respond to it.
Yeah,
because Avi, guess what?
Yeah.
It's coming.
I think there is a petition right now, and it has about 25 names on it, so there might have to be a little more pressure than that.
Early days, early days. That's Avi Lewis. He is the co-author of the Leap Manifesto. He is a filmmaker, and he has been our guest here on the agenda tonight. Thanks, Avi.
Pleasure.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.